It's Phumlani Majosi, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. This is the Phumlani Majosi show. I'm in America. As you do know, I've been posting about that this past week. I'm having a remarkable time in California. Very, very expensive though. And maybe my guest will give a few thoughts on why things are so expensive in California, because I'm speaking to Dumisani Washington. Yes, Dumisani. Yes, you heard that me right. Dumisani Washington, an American. He's a founder CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel. He's an author of Zionism and the Black Church. He's also the host of Truth to Power live with Dumisani Washington. Mr. Washington, wonderful to see you, sir. Finally, we connect, or at least we are talking like this virtually. We do know
Absolutely.
each other on X. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Phumlani. It's good to see you again. You're in my home state. I'm no longer there.
You are no
But
longer there. Yes.
yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. But again, welcome to America again, sir.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful,
Yes, sir.
Dumisani. So, Dumisani, you have seen what's been going on between South Africa and the US of A. I have been saying I've been disappointed. Me as a South African, as a political economic analyst, as someone who has been following the affairs of South Africa for a very long time. I just think that when it comes to how we have done as a nation on foreign policy, the foreign policy of the ANC over the past 20 years or so, I think it went counter to the needs of the people, to the interests of the people, right?
Mm.
The ANC government's foreign policy over the past years. I felt to Misani that, or I have felt for some time that how our government has pursued its foreign policy has never been about the interests of the people. It's
Mhm.
been largely about the interests of the ANC elite. How do you see South Africa's foreign policy? You are an American, you live in America, you do watch South Africa. What's going on here? What do you see?
Well, obviously, with humility and respect, Pulani, because I am
Yeah.
not South African, and all due respect and great love for all my South African brothers and sisters, I have been observing it for a while. I have South African family, of course, through marriage. Our dear Olga, who just passed away, so it's been something that I have considered and discussed for 30 plus years. So I just want to put some context. My feeling has been for a long time, but especially over the last few years, as you mentioned, and even more so since October the 7th in Israel with the Hamas massacre, is that the ANC of Nelson Mandela, in my opinion, is not the same ANC of today. I think that you are correct in that, unfortunately, there seems to be more of a concern with its own self perpetuation rather than the needs of the people. We know, I don't have to tell you, that poverty rates, crime rates, all of these things, lacks of accessibility to the poor or the lower class, especially Black South Africans, is in some metrics worse than it was during apartheid. Not that apartheid was good, it was evil. But at the same time, what we're looking at now is the state of the people that does not seem to be the primary concern of the ANC ruling class. That seems to be more of, and I know we'll get into it, what Tehran would like to see rather than what the people of South Africa would like to see. And it has been heartbreaking to see because, again, I don't need to tell you, South Africa, a beautiful country, beautiful people, resourceful people, amazing people, but who are not being given the opportunity to really access and exploit their own gifts and abilities there. It's been very, very sad to see.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that because you've alluded to this in your comments now, that how the ANC has been conducting itself on foreign policy, it seems to have been a distraction from the failures on issues of job opportunities, right? A stronger economic growth. Our economy, Dumsani, underperforms in emerging markets. In the first term of Ramaphosa, the average economic growth was only not 0.5%, right?
Mm.
0.5%.
Mm.
And our population growth is around 1.5% or so, right? So we're a nation really that underperforms when it comes to when it comes to the economy. And we have our people getting poorer, and we have the infrastructure that has never been doing well. You have the crime problem that you touched on. It seems to, and we are not the first person to say this, it seems to be this pivot to foreign policy in the way that they've been doing it, especially now with the issue of after October 7, attacks on Israel. That seems to be, the ANC tried to distract from its failures, right, in the country, and then move to pushing for this, ICJ, International Court of Justice case, genocide case against Israel.
Yes.
Is that what we are saying here, that it was a distraction in a form? Do you agree with me in that way?
I do, and I would go further and say that is it's a kind of a microcosm of the broader distraction, meaning yes, the domestic issues where South Africa is concerned, again, is not only something that the ANC is not seemingly focused on, but is focused on other things that most South Africans are not concerned with, right? Whether it's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, what Hamas would like, all of those things, right? Most South Africans, and we've seen polls on this, are more concerned with what's going on in their own country rather than what's going on in the Middle East and that type of thing. And the reason I say a microcosm, and if I could say it that way, if that's a fair way to say it, is that has been the case for a while. And I want to submit to you just for an example. 2001, and I'm not assuming your age. I know I'm older than you, but I don't know how much older. But 2001, we're going back 24 years now, right? 25 years, I believe it is now. Yes? That was the Durban Conference, right, on racism. There's a United Nations hosted a conference in Durban called a Conference Against Racism and Apartheid. I can't remember the actual title. Anyway, can Google it and see. And it was in that conference that Israel was formally designated an apartheid state. They used the language of apartheid against Israel. This was in Durban 2001. Now, what is also known is that the agenda for much of that conference was set in Tehran, Iran. This is all documented, right? So Tehran and Israel's other enemies there in Islamic Republic of Iran, a very oppressive regime. Once again, another country of a beautiful people, right? And very capable people, but who are under the thumb of the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Ayatollah regime, right? So what you had, the reason I'm pointing to that, Phumlani, is that this was the marking point, again, of the distraction. Now, again, that particular conference wasn't hosted by the ANC. The ANC was not the driving force behind it. But what we saw, or what we have seen in the last quarter century since then, is more and more of an ANC shift further and further, not just so much against Israel, but pro-Hamas, right? Pro-jihad against Israel, which again is something completely beyond the pale of a Nelson Mandela era ANC.
So now you've brought in Iran here. How much influence, in your perspective, does Iran have, not only in South Africa, right? Because I'm sure, I wonder if it's just that I haven't looked into it carefully. If Iran does have, or at least attempts to have a greater influence in other African countries. What is Iran trying to do in Africa, in South Africa with the ANC? What's going on between Iran and the ANC? Tell us more about that, Iran. Yeah.
Well, what we've had is reports that have come, and I can link some to you and send you as well. About Iran's involvement in terms of money. Its attempt to influence what happens in the ANC. And this is for the purpose of exploitation. This is very, very, very clear. Iran, which is one of the main funders of Hamas, as is Qatar, the government of Qatar, right? You have almost, I hate to say it this way, let me be very honest, almost a three-headed dragon when it comes to Islamic terrorism in the region, particularly in Africa. That would be Turkey, Iran, Qatar. And so what has been the focus, for example, is to exploit the government of South Africa, particularly the ANC, and again, exploit the apartheid legacy, just like the Black American legacy of through slavery and through Jim Crow segregation and all those things. So Black South Africans had to very bravely face these things that were trying to extinguish them. They were able to do that, but now nefarious people are trying to use that legacy against Israel and against other parts of the free world. So in answer to your question, Iran, Qatar's influence there is formidable. Again, Qatar is another one of the main benefactors where the Hamas is concerned. Hamas, that's one of their main holding places, if you will, along with Turkey, right? So you have this happening in South Africa. I'll say one more thing. Ynet, which is an Israeli paper, just last week came out with a report about the Houthis, a terrorist group that's based in Yemen, and their infiltration throughout Africa, including South Africa. And who are the Houthis belong to? Iran. So in answer to your question, Iran's influence is formidable, not just in South Africa, but across the continent, but especially in South Africa.
Yeah. So how should this be handled in your view? What's the response? We're gonna come back to the ICJ case for now.
Yes, sir.
But how do we deal with Iran? Let's stick, because it seems to me we are saying that at the source, at the core of the problem, the roots of the problem, because Iran is funding, and we're not the first person to say that. I've read about that, I've heard about it, that Iran is the funder, the supporter, financier of these, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah. I'm not sure. Do they fund Hezbollah as well in some
Yes,
form?
sir, absolutely. Hezbollah is an arm of Iran. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So how do you deal with this? If you deal with Iran, do you address, if you were to, what can I call, right? Disable Iran from in some form, whether it's military, however this is done, that would address the issue, right? Because that's the core, the roots problem. It's Iran.
I would say it's a huge part of it. It's not the only part, but it is a huge part. Absolutely. When you're talking about the type of influence that is being placed on South Africa, particularly the ANC, you are talking about, this is the connection to what we were saying earlier about the domestic issues where South Africa is concerned. The ANC not only not tending to these economic issues that are very, very desperately needed, but distracting itself with the will of the Ayatollahs, of Hamas, right? Again, for example, just as you already know, but let me say this for people listening, what benefit is it of any South African for a South African government to take Israel to the ICJ? None whatsoever. And even for people say it's a moral cause, what about the moral cause of the Boko Haram slaughtering Christians in Nigeria? There's all kinds of moral causes all over the continent. The question becomes, what benefit is it to South Africa, its economy, its education for its young people? How does the ANC, working as hand in hand with Iran, attacking Israel, help anybody in South Africa? And this is what we are saying. While the situation continues to deteriorate in South Africa, who's benefiting from it? Well, if you're talking about places like Iran or like Hamas, these entities, they are benefiting now from the oppression of the South African people. Why? Because the more the ANC listens to what Tehran or Hamas is saying, the less they are concerned with what's going on with their own people. This is very, very, and I'll say this last part, this is throughout Africa. Nigeria is suffering a genocide of Christians. And once again, Iran's handprint is there as well, right? Al-Qaeda is involved. The Sahel region is on fire. You have these emerging African economies like what's going on in Burkina Faso. And one of the things that this young leader is trying to do, among many other things, is defend his country against the jihadists that are trying to infiltrate his country. This is the maybe the fight of Africa's life right now in terms of its emerging and moving forward. How can we have a healthy economy in an African country when we have Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Hamas, when we have these very, very nefarious actors seeking to not just destroy Africa, but to use it as an Islamic caliphate?
Dumisani, I have said many times in my analysis back home, and in my podcasts, and that is, why didn't Arab nations, Dumisani, why was it not them who took Israel to ICJ and accused of genocide? Why did it have to be us, a country based on the southern tip of Africa, right at the bottom, Dumisani, right? Largely a country where at least 80% of the people identify as Christian, right? That's what the data shows, at least 80%. Where amongst the ordinary people, this matter is not of a concern. You alluded to that earlier, right? Amongst our people. You have many congregations, Dumisani, you are familiar with South Africa, many black churches
Yes, sir.
who go to Israel every year, right?
Yes.
We have a spiritual connection with
Yes, sir.
Israel,
Yes, sir.
as this is a Christian, nation. What was the benefit of this? you know, why did it have to be us in the southern tip of Africa?
I shake my head because that question right there is a 3 hour answer. I won't give a 3 hour answer, I promise you. I
Hmm.
write about it in my book. Phumlani, you have just touched on the main issue when it regards to Arab Islamic exploitation of Black people, whether they're Africans or Africans in the diaspora. This has been the case, Phumlani, especially since the 1960s, but you can go back even further.
Yeah.
In 1964, the former Soviet Union, the KGB, formed what we know now as the Palestine Liberation Organization. It is not an Arab creation. It is a Soviet disinformation. Again, for people who think it's this conspiracy theory, we have all the receipts, we have all the information about who formed the PLO and why, after Yasser Arafat, who became the chairman in 1969, was his focus Black people. Nelson Mandela, Louis Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson, whether they were on the continent or whether they were in the United States of America. And here's the answer to that question. He knew that no thinking person would sign on to the genocidal desire of the Palestinians to destroy the state of Israel. But if he connected himself to Black civil rights leaders, if he connected himself to the Black and African historic struggle for justice and freedom, then people would take him seriously and see his genocidal cause as a justice cause, which is where we are today. So in answer to your question, Phumlani, what the Arab powers are doing, who are demonizing Israel, and of course, not all Arab powers, there are some Arab nations who have actually they have a peace agreements with Israel, whether that's Egypt, whether that's a UAE from the Abraham Accords. So when we're talking about these Arab powers that are still trying to demonize and destroy Israel, why go to South Africa? Because what other state in Africa, particularly in the modern era, with the apartheid legacy of the Mandiba and all the things that we saw international camaraderie, if you will, for the Black South Africans fighting against apartheid, did we not, right? This becomes a glorified struggle, just like the civil rights struggle with Dr. King here in the 1960s and 50s. So what was the benefit for the Arab powers to connect themselves to South Africa and have them drag Israel to the courts, not just in the courts, but in the court of opinion? Because Black people doing it gave it more legitimacy. This is the wealth and the power that we have as Black people. That it's almost like we talked about before. It's like when Madison Avenue, Nike goes to a young Michael Jordan and say, wear these shoes and we'll pay you millions of dollars. Why? Because we know that if you wear them, every other kid in the United States will spend $100 for some Michael Jordans. It is the same thing. The Arab powers go to Black leaders and say, wave this free Palestine flag. And when you do it, it gives our cause legitimacy.
In the case of South Africa, what they've done is to basically to give an analogy of saying, well, you as Black people, you went through the same thing. You
Yes.
were also what apartheid was to you, it's also to us, right?
Yes.
They've
Yes.
managed to. You have many movements in South Africa,
Yes.
from the ANC to non-political ones,
Mm.
that keep on saying there's apartheid in that region. Apartheid, Israel is an apartheid state.
Yes. Yes.
Tell my followers, Dumisani,
Yes.
why Israel is not an apartheid state, right? Tell them.
For those who are listening who have experienced apartheid, if you know what apartheid is, and then if you compare that to the free and democratic state that is the Jewish state of Israel. Again, let's just go ahead and get this first out of the thing. There's no nation that's perfect. Every nation has its flaws. But you're talking about a Jewish state of Israel in which there's freedom of religion, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Baha'i, atheist. It makes absolutely no difference. You are free to worship as you choose, in which you have access within every echelon of government or any industry, whether you're Arab, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Jewish. There are Arabs on the Supreme Court in Israel. There are Arabs in the parliament in Israel. I challenge anyone who understands what apartheid was. How many Black political parties were in the parliament during the time of South Africa's apartheid? How many Black Supreme Court justices were there in South Africa during the time of apartheid, and on and on. How many black bus drivers were there in the white districts in South Africa, and on and on and on. This is the huge difference when that lie is being told. Israel is not an apartheid state. Israel is a nation of some 100 something different ethnicities who live in the land, who some basically who've come are Jewish and returned to their homeland. Some are Jewish who've been there for literally centuries and centuries. And it is, as again, as imperfect as any other place, is a place where there is freedom of religion, where there is freedom in terms of its access in government, all of those things. Doesn't resemble anything like apartheid. I remember a good friend of mine, young man who's a black South African, Klas, Machamlume. I think I'm saying his name the right way. I always say his last name wrong. He's one of many stories that we know. I was introduced to him by Olga, our dearly departed Olga. Klaus and I were together in Israel the last time, maybe a couple of years ago. And it's funny. His story is a funny story, but it's a story. He tells it often. You may have heard it already. He, who was a member of the young ANC, went to South Africa because he wanted to see himself, right? If I'm going to talk about this place, I want to be more educated about it. I love that about my the South African brothers and sisters. Yeah. So he gets there to Ben Gurion Airport. And I don't know if you've already been to Israel yet, Phumlani. If not, you got to go soon. He goes to the Ben Gurion Airport. He's going to get his bag. He has to go to the restroom. He goes to the security guard and said, "Excuse me, sir, where is the colored toilet?" And the guard looks at him very funny. He goes, "Toilet is over there. Toilet over there." No. Where is the colored toilet? Yeah. And Klaus could not believe it. He said, the Israeli didn't understand what he meant. There are no colored toilets or Arab toilets or Jewish toilets, but that was the case during apartheid South Africa. Just like in the Jim Crow South, it was white only, black only. Nothing like that has ever existed in Israel. So the apartheid lie is just that. It's a bald-faced lie that has caused Israelis and Africans to suffer.
Yeah. And I heard that the Arab population is about 20% of the Israeli population. Yes. And they're all free, as you say. And they participate productively in the economy. Some serve in very big institutions in Israel. So, I mean, it's been sad to see, that narrative about Israel. I'm speaking to the founder, CEO of Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, author of Zionism and the Black Church, host of the Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. I'm speaking to Mr. Dumisani Washington. So Dumisani, now let's come to the Arab-Israeli normalization process, right? I've been speaking to people about that. It seems like, and one of the questions I've asked people is this one. Do you agree that Israel, from a geopolitical perspective, from a geopolitics perspective, it's in a much better position today than what it was, say, 80s, 70s, right? In the sense that it's being accepted in the Middle East, it's getting partners. So from a geopolitical perspective, it seems to be, it has made strides with many, I would say with important Arab nations. Is that your assessment as well, that Israel is in a much better geopolitical position now than, say, 50 years ago?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that Israel, which is already an economic powerhouse, it is a technological powerhouse. You're right there in the Bay Area. The Silicon Valley is known right there in San Jose, not too far from where you are. The second Silicon Valley is known in Tel Aviv, Israel. So that has been the case for quite a while. But now with the ushering of the Abraham Accords, with talks of normalizations with Saudi Arabia, on top of that, even in the midst of the negative that's going on, there's some very, very powerful positives that are happening. Israel is stronger, even as it continues to fight its war against Hamas, even as it continues to keep a close eye on what's going on in Syria because of the fighting that's been happening there and the new regime that's there. There's some causes for concern. Even with all of those things as a reality, Phumlani, what we have now is Israel strong and making strides and forming more and more alliances, or at the very least peace accords with its Arab neighbors. That is good news for Israel, for the Arab neighbors, as well as Africa and the region, because obviously the more peace there is, the more there is economic prosperity. Just like there's more war there is, the more there is poverty and destitution, right? So this is a very, very powerful moment that we are in. And it really is a contrast, right? We have global anti-Semitism happening, probably more in the West than even in the East. But you have Arab powers making more and more alliances with Israel, right? And you have, again, emerging African markets that are happening as well. But there's always been somewhat amenable to Israel, even though there's been the manipulation in the United Nations. So 100%, we are looking at, in my opinion, a great, almost golden age. If we can navigate through these very difficult circumstances, you can have great economic prosperity for everyone in the region, especially Africa.
Mm-hmm. And then here's the big question now. Um, I want to get your, very much interested in your answer here. What's the way forward for Palestinians? Because I agree with Professor Neil Ferguson, or Sir Neil Ferguson now, the historian who said the other day, that after October 7 attacks, the chances of a Palestinian state have become even more slim, very, very small, right? They've become smaller after the October 7 attacks. What's the future of Palestinians in your view? How do you see it? What should it be at this point?
Again, my opinion, as humbly as I'm weighing in on this, and I agree, like many people have said, October 7th, everything shifted. October 7th kind of shifted everything.
Yeah, even internally, Dumisani, sorry to interject.
No.
Internally, by the way, just to let you know, I was in Israel in May last year. This is a few months after the October 7 attacks, at Dumisani. I went to the Nova Festival site. It was very painful to be there. I was at the kibbutz, the southern part where there was destruction and attacks. We also went to the north to learn about the Israel's battle with Hezbollah. So it was really a moving trip. So it was a very touching trip. But to get back to your, to what you're saying, how does this look like going forward?
I think it's very complex. I think that you have a situation, for example, where Gaza is concerned. It is pretty much understood that Hamas can no longer rule the Gaza Strip.
I sense that when I was there. Yeah.
If we start with that as the central issue in terms of who governs that area, then it goes from there. What happens to the Palestinians in Gaza? Obviously, we already know that President Trump has asked other Arab powers to take in the Gazans, that type of thing. They are surrounded. Egypt wants nothing to do with the Palestinians in Gaza. There's a huge, we also talk about the barrier that separates Gaza and Israel. The barrier that separates Egypt and Gaza is, even if you've seen it, it's a military fortress. They cannot get through. They want nothing to do with those people. And this is true in much of the Arab world, has been the case. So the Arab Palestinians have suffered a great deal because of, among other things, they have been so exploited and so weaponized against just Israel, right? And not just it's Israel. One of the reasons that people are wondering why Egypt has such a strong border there is because Palestinians have gone into Egypt to cause havoc. They've killed people in Egypt. They fought against Egypt's military as well. Again, the media never talks about this, but this happens on a regular basis, which is unfortunately why Egypt has to deal with Gaza the way that it does. I think that a way forward has to be, among other things, a real investment where the Arab Palestinians are concerned, so that there can emerge some sort of leaders who, as we were saying in the beginning, who are concerned about their own people, not about demonizing the Zionists, not about destroying Israel or destroying free societies, but really want to see their people thrive. I think that until we see that, and I want to say this as well, Phumlani, along with what you were saying. It's very important that people realize that there have been people in Gaza for years who have protested Hamas. This is long before we get to October 7th. Right? Our organization, IBSI, Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, is one of many that have shared videos and articles of people in Gaza risking their lives, hundreds, sometimes thousands, marching in Gaza City. And if you understand about Hamas as a very, very brutal dictator, they do not allow freedom of speech and protest. They would disband those protests with guns. They would torture the people. They would throw them in jail. They didn't care if the protesters were 16, 17 years old. So there have been people, I'm not saying that they're Zionists. I'm not saying they're pro-Israel. I'm saying that they were tired of being under the boot of Hamas, and they took their lives into their own hands, and they have protested. So this has been the case. Sadly, those people have not been venerated by the media. They have not been taken seriously by the broad, especially the mainstream media, to really be given a voice. It's very similar to the people of Iran, right? In which they are under the boot of the Ayatollahs. They are not anti-Israel. This is very different in that sense. They're very pro-Israel, as a matter of fact. As a matter of fact, the Christian population is growing in Iran faster than any other place in the world, proving that the Ayatollahs' disinformation campaign did not work. What are they needing? They're needing someone to amplify their voice. What the people of the Palestinian in Gaza needed was for people to amplify their voice against Hamas, because these were the people who could very well help there to be some sort of change. Until that situation is rectified, it's difficult to really say then what happens with the Palestinians, because at this point, there's no leaders that have emerged that are truly concerned about the Arab Palestinian people.
Yeah. Economist Thomas Sowell, he once wrote that part of the problem in Palestine is that there weren't leaders who would be, want to make peace with Israel, right? And that whoever, at least, whoever tries to make peace, that person will be, there's a high chance he will be murdered, killed, right?
I want to interject this to your point. For those who were in and understand, and I'll now speak directly to Black South Africans, you had the Nelson Mandelas, you had the others, whether part of the ANC or other political parties, who were joined in the fight against the oppressive regime of the apartheid government. So there was a clear path forward in terms of what would happen afterwards. I submit to people, understand that when it comes to the people of Gaza, there's not that clear path forward. There is no Mandiba. There is no person who's not only who's concerned about the people, but also wants to have peace. As you know, Phumlani, I have to tell you about your own history. Yeah. Some people got upset with Mandela. They said, are we going to get the white people back? He said, no, we want a South Africa for everyone. And some who were more radical, they didn't appreciate that, right? They wanted their pound of flesh. They said, let's go and get these white people. He said, no, let's build a strong South Africa so that we can all access. Until something like that happens in Gaza among the Arab Palestinian people, there's really no real path forward.
No path forward. Dumisani Washington, wonderful to talk to you, sir. Dumisani is the founder, CEO of Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, author of Zionism and the Black Church, host of the Truth to Power Live with Dumisani Washington. I'm back in South Africa this weekend. I'm traveling back, so I look forward to returning back to my country and address my problems, Dumisani, in my country. But I learned a lot here. So my followers, remember to subscribe to my channel. Do follow me on X at Phumlani Majozi. I'm also on TikTok as Phumlani Majozi. I'm also on Facebook, Phumlani Majozi. I'm also on Instagram at Phumlani Majozi. Remember to check Dumisani's book, Zionism and the Black Church. It's available on Amazon, right, Dumisani?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Awesome. So they should check your book. So great to talk to you.
You too, Phumlani. Thank you so much.
Thank you.